Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is David A., and I am an alcoholic. And only because of God's grace through the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been sober 8 days in 28 years. And for this, I have to thank 9 days, really. First of all, I want to thank Dave and the committee for inviting both Grace and myself to be here this weekend with you. And for Bob and his lovely wife, picked us up and found us in Rochester and drove us down. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful conference up to now. The only thing I know about being an alcoholic is how I drank alcohol. And when I tell anyone, any place, anywhere that in AA or out of AA, it means that I fit every line, every word, every comma, every period, every paragraph, every page, every chapter in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I know no other way to live sober except the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. And thank God, since April the 20th of 1967, I have not found any reason whatever to leave Alcoholics Anonymous. To find an easier way to live sober, a more sociably acceptable way to live sober, a more fun way to live sober, nor a more exciting way to live sober. Thank God I haven't had to go to one of those action-reaction courses, concentration movement, related disorders institute. When I got to you people, my wife was a related disorder. Hanging there till your drawers fall off, baby, sexual dysfunction seminars. I'll tell you, if you get as old as I am and been able to stay sober only by the grace, today I do not need a sexual dysfunction seminar. I need a memory course. As our book of experience says, our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, what we're like now. Well, it was on the last Sunday in August of 1950. Last August, it was 44 years ago, that a group of fine, sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous invited me to come to an open AA meeting at the Suburban Group in Dallas, Texas. The Wednesday before that Sunday, I stumbled into one of Dallas's more affluent barbershops, and I fell in this charitist manicurist table. Now, I was more at myself that morning. Now, being more at myself in those days meant that I was drinking. I wasn't too drunk. Oh, I could sit in a chair for about 10 minutes without falling out of it. I could navigate to and from the men's room and go out and get me another bottle of whiskey. I sat down, this old ugly gal looked at me and she said, "David," and right there and then I should have known something's wrong. She didn't call me doctor. She said, "David, I belong to a deal called Alcoholics Anonymous and I have not had a drink of alcohol in a year." And I looked at Edith and I said, "You are a liar. Nobody stays sober a year. Maybe a day, maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days, but not a year." She said, "No, I haven't had a drink in a year." Now, Edith looked like a drunk ought to look like. She had big bug eyes and gaps in her teeth, and God bless her nose had been busted so many times, just sort of leaned on the left side of her face. Now, this back in the days before the guys used to wear pantyhose, you used to wear garter belts, you know, to pull their drawers down, hold their socks up. And when she was drinking, hers always trailed behind her uniform. She'd trip and fall and drop all those manicuring bottles and things. And back in those days, the ladies used to wear hose with the seams up the back. You could always tell when Edith was drunk. The seams in the front was in the back. Now, the best way I can describe Edith's looks as a drunk, in our part of the country and in lots of parts of the country, if your car happens to be caught out in a hailstorm and it's pretty badly beaten up, right when you get your insurance check, if you have insurance, some wise buzzard said, "I don't get it fixed. Let it sit out in the hot sun for about 3 or 4 weeks and all the dents will pop back out." Her dents never popped back out. But she's a great gal, but when Edith told me she hadn't had a drink of alcohol in a year, that got my attention, because I drank a lot of alcohol with Edith. And when Edith was drinking alcohol, she had the reputation of being a mean, nasty, fighting woman drunk. Now, she could outdrink any man on the moon, under the moon, around the moon, on the earth. She carried a big black purse. Always had 2 pints of whiskey in that purse. And she'd kill you if you got in that purse. And there she was, and that got my attention. And I looked for the change. I noticed she'd changed. I looked up at her face, and her lipstick was on her lips and not her eyebrows. I sniffed her, and she didn't smell halfway between an Avon woman and a whiskey bottle. She didn't grab her purse now and say, "Now, I'll be back in 10 minutes and maybe show up 11 months later." But I noticed the real change. The change was in her eyes. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we have 2 kinds of eyes. We have those sad, sick eyes, and then we have those happy, dancing, laughing, sparkling, living, sober eyes. Oh, yes, we got another kind of eyes, look, that glassy look. They'll get up behind one of these things, say, I haven't had a drink of alcohol, and then fall over. But her eyes were sparkling, and they were jumping, and they were laughing, and she looked like she was having a lot of fun living sober. Then she turned to another manicurist in the shop by the name of Moina, and she says, Moina is my sponsor, and she has 15 months sober in this deal called Alcoholics Anonymous. And back in those days in Alcoholics Anonymous, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, anytime we mentioned or talked about our sponsors, it was with reverence, because we respected our sponsors. We respect our sponsors because we literally turned our lives over to their experiences and not their opinions. And we find, as a result of our experiences in Alcoholics Anonymous, that we're asked to share our experiences, not our opinions. Because in many, many instances, opinions have a tendency to make sick people sicker, and in some instances to physically kill people. We have no right to monkey with anyone's emotions or anyone's heads or anything else in the world. We have only one story to tell, our own, and this is all that any of us will know. We can't promise that'll happen to anything or anybody. That's the precise reason that it says in chapter 5, if you decide you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. As much as we want to do it for them, as much as we want to get all the drunks that are out there drinking and bring them in and hug them and rock them to sleep, we know that we can't do that. We know we can't. But I had many, many years to go before I realized this. Now, I drank a lot of more alcohol with Moina than I did with Edith. And when they said Moina hadn't had a drink in 15 months, I looked at Moina, I said, you're a bigger liar than Goofy over here. I said, Moina, we had a drink night. And she says, no, David, I've not had a drink of alcohol with you or anyone else or myself in 15 continuous months. Edith has not had a drink of alcohol in 12 continuous months. Little did I realize that those precious words that fine lady said to me that morning would stick with me for many, many years. She talked about continuous sobriety. At that time, I had no reason whatever to know that it was one day at a time. And then that fine lady said, David, she said, we have an open meeting this Sunday at 5:30. It's open so the public can come in and hear and see how an alcoholic recovers in the recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous, how an alcoholic lives the AA way of life, and also to find out what AA is and what AA is not. And believe it or not, the greatest challenge that we have within Alcoholics Anonymous right this tick of time all over the world, that there are hundreds of thousands of our members who do not know what Alcoholics Anonymous is not. That we're not all things for all people. The singleness of purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous has made Alcoholics Anonymous the envy of every self-help try-to-problem group in the world today. And they all want our success, but they're not willing to go through the frustrations and the experience that brought us down to where we have to walk it. We have to remember about members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Members of Alcoholics Anonymous were, are, and I guess will always be alcoholics, even though many have other addictions. And that umbrella covers it all, every bit of it. And I did not know this. And then she says also, being it's the last Sunday of the month, they have a sort of little birthday anniversary party for those who have 1 or more years of continuous sobriety. And she said, we would like for you and your wife to come and attend that open meeting and stay afterwards for that birthday party. And I thought that the only reason that people such as you would invite someone such as me to come to one of your AA meetings and stay to one of your AA functions is that you needed to have some good-looking, outstanding, and successful professional man come and upgrade you lepers in the community. And I'm glad to come help you. So I went home and told my wife, Grace, and God, she was thrilled because people had long since quit asking us to come around. My wife used to ask me, why did we're not asked to the outdoor barbecues and round dances and square dances and nightclub supper parties and card parties and domino parties and swimming pool parties? I said, it's you. It's you. I said, every time we're asked to go out to one of those things, you start on me on the Monday before. And you start screaming, you're not going to drink, you're not going to get drunk, are you? You wake me up out of a sound sleep 5:30 the next morning screaming, did you hear what I said? And you keep it up Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. And what a tremendous price society has had to pay, is paying, I guess will always pay. Those who love us, those who hate us, those who do not even care that we even exist on this earth. What a tremendous price those people are paying to find out that the more you scream at our kind about our drinking, the more we're going to drink. I said, and furthermore, when we get to where we're supposed to get to, before I can even park the car, you're out of the car. You run in, you grab the host and the hostess, and you chase them out of the kitchen, through the den, and the backyard, and the alley, and the bushes, and the garbage, and the neighborhood screaming, don't you give him a drink of alcohol. Woman, you're sick, that's what's wrong with you. But through tear-filled eyes, she said, we're going to meeting, and I said, yes. And so that Sunday morning, I got up at 5:30 in the morning to get ready to go to an AA meeting 5:30 that afternoon. Well, now, what does a good self-respectful drinking drunk do when he gets up 5:30 on Sunday morning? Drinks alcohol, that's what he does. Let's face it, it's very simple. Golfers golf, fishermen fish, drunks drink. There's no big mystery. And I started sucking on a brand new bottle of juice, you know how it is? That first drink gets your breathing started. Then that second drink regulates your breathing. Then that third drink goes down to both heels and just sets you there. Now you're ready to do some real drinking. And I'm drinking and I'm looking at the birds and the bees and the trees, and I'm hearing the neighbors screaming, Johnny, get dressed, we will be late for church. And I said, oh, those sick people, they do not know what living really is. If they could just learn how to control it and enjoy it like I was doing, that they would find out that right after breathing in and out, alcohol is the second greatest gift God's given mankind. Amen. Took another drink. Drank half of that fifth of that whiskey and put the other half, the fifth, in the trunk of my car, because I knew at that time that I was going to be required to have another drink of alcohol. Maybe a second later, maybe 2 minutes later, maybe 3 hours later, maybe 6 hours later, but I knew I was going to have me a drink. And I'm one of these that firmly believes that if and when an alcoholic comes to us, that until and unless that alcoholic is willing to find out what's wrong with that alcoholic will never be able to find out what can get right with that alcoholic. And I went in and I bathed and I shaved and I put on everything rich and nice looking to impress those poor, sick people in Alcoholics Anonymous. Put on a beautiful brand new tailor-made suit. White on white monogram shirt, monogram handkerchief, monogram tie, monogram drawers. Put on my diamond ring, my diamond watch, and the trademark of every good, self-respectful, high-rolling, drinking drunk. A brand new pair of custom-made alligator shoes. I look just like a used car salesman. Or a dope dealer. And at 10:30 in the morning, I'm out in my long Roadmaster Buick honking the horn. And out comes my wife with the rollers in her hair. And she has on this all-your-fault kimono that they just left to live in and dwell in and cry in. To where she'd lost a string around the middle and it's pinned together with a big baby diaper pin. And she's pulled all the threading and the padding and the fussing and the buttons off the front. And the front's just covered with tear stains and cigarette burns. It's what us drunks and Alcoholics Anonymous lovingly call the Al-Anon designer house coat. And in a beautiful, kindly, wifely tone of voice, she screams out, what do you want, you no good, sorry drunk? And meanwhile, all the neighbors had gathered out. And her side is lined up over here, and my side is lined up over here. And I can still hear the fine ladies of the neighborhood saying, isn't it a shame? There's such a beautiful and fine lady and the mother of 2 beautiful little boys married to such a sorry, no good drunk like him. And my bunch over here hollering out, let her have it, David, let her have it. And that used to be the weekend entertainment in every neighborhood we lived in. We moved 24 times before we come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Sometimes at midnight, high noon, daybreak, ahead of the sheriff, a few times with the sheriff. Behind the sheriff, just kept moving. And I said, let's go to the meeting. She said, doesn't get started for 7 more hours, you no good drunk. And with that, she turned on her heels and went in the house. And that started 7 tough hours because here it was Sunday. And I'm sucking on the only bottle of juice that I've got. And I knew I was going to have me a drink. But I knew that if I went and got a bootlegger or called a taxi cab to go get me some whiskey, I'd blow the deal because, you see, when I got out of the service the first time, in 48, the sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous in Dallas, Texas tried to net me. They tried to net me in 49. They tried to net me in 47, rather, in 48 and 49, and in January of 50. And they thought they set the trap on the last Sunday, August of 1950. So I found just enough to nurse me along because, you see, I was one of those kind that when I drank, I rolled it all the way. And one of the biggest problems I had with the exception of my last 3 or 4 years of drinking, they'd find me and they'd bring me home, and I wasn't through drinking. And I'd cry, and I'd get on my knees, and I'd beg, and I'd pray, and I'd put my hand in the Bible, around the Bible, under the cat's belly, the dog's tail. I'll never do it again. And I waited, as soon as they put some more money or a check in my shirt pocket, and they turned their back, I'd run off to finish the drunk. Now, I was a stay away from home kind of drunk, not on purpose. I'd get drunk, and I ended up in countries I never knew existed on this earth. I ended up with people I never saw before in my life. Sometimes with money, sometimes without, sometimes with clothes on, sometimes the other way. I'd gone one time, they tell me about 11 months. No one knew where I was. My mother, my father, my wife, our 2 sons, my patients, my enemies, my friends. No one knew where I was. And I come running in the house with the same clothes I guess I had been in for about 5 months. And I asked my wife this brilliant question: did anybody call? And that does not make for good marriage relationships, I'll tell you. So I found just enough to nurse me along. And finally, at 4:30, I honked the horn, here she came, and off we went. And we drove up to this meeting place, and we went out, and I walked in. There must have been about 80 members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and a wife, and a kid, and a poodle or two jumping up and down. And it looked like to me that everybody, they were hugging, and they were kissing, and they were laughing, and they were scratching, and they were rubbing up against, and they were smoking, and all this. I stepped back, and I looked at those idiots, and I said, by gosh, if they're alcoholic, and they're having that much fun, and they're not drinking alcohol, then they had to be on dope. And then I looked up, and I saw all them signs in an AA group, and I said, my God, I'm in a kindergarten. And then I saw, but for the grace of God, my head ducked. Because I knew at that time that I was not living according to the dictates of God's will for a human being. And I'm one of these that firmly believes that if and when an alcoholic comes to us, even though many of us come to Alcoholics Anonymous without a full string of lights in their head, that deep down inside every one of us know this. If there is a principle that we never hear, or if very, very rarely discussed in AA, that every one of us are born human beings first. We get so carried away of when we become an alcoholic. AA is not interested when we become an alcoholic. What do you want to do about living sober as a problem drinker? We get so carried away. I was born an alcoholic. I don't know about you, but I got to listen to that stuff. That's a dangerous thing to listen to in AA. And so I had to go get a copy of my birth certificate. And that's the first thing I did when I ran out of that office of vital statistics to see if I was born an alcoholic. I read it, and you know what it said? I was born alive. Isn't that amazing? But you see, we fail to discuss that. Because you see, Alcoholics Anonymous does something that formalized, organized religion has not up to now, and probably never will have the success that AA has with our kind of people. Medicine has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Psychiatry has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Government agencies has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Social services has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Human willpower has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Acupuncture has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Hypnosis has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Horoscopes has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Biorhythm charts has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Witch doctors has not, is not, will ever be able to do it. Because Alcoholics Anonymous reaches down the innermost depths of a human being. This fine, precious thing that comes with us is a gift. When when a human being is given the most precious gift that a human being will ever possess or ever be given, and that is life, when we begin to breathe in and out. Because right there and then is the creation, formation, development of selfishness and self-centeredness. And from this selfishness and self-centeredness stems all those defects of character. Those defects that we refuse to recognize as moral. Those defects that made our lives unmanageable. Resentment, selfishness, dishonesty, and fear. And not wanting to tell another human being how darn phony we are, or what's really churning within inside of each and every one of us. And then you pour alcohol into someone like me, and you've got something going. When I was drinking, I tried to drown my defects of character. But the son of a guns learned how to swim. And they darn near killed me. Yeah. And because you see, Alcoholics Anonymous reaches down to this most precious thing, this fine, precious thing that says to each and every one of us, if we'll listen, after we get physically comfortable from the agent that forces us to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, thank you, little alcoholic, for not taking a drink of alcohol today. Thank you, little alcoholic, for finding a way to have a reasonably good night's sleep. But more important, thank you, little alcoholic, for finding a group of people who love you no matter what you have done, what you are doing, or what you ever will do. And that is where the great power of our society lies, one of our kind talking to another. And I did not know this. And then they either whistled, rang a bell, or did something, and everybody went in the meeting. And I went and I sat on the back row to see what kind of help I could afford to give those poor, sick people. And the first talker got up as the lyingest, cheatingest woman I'd ever been around in my life. And she had nerve enough to stand up in front of 80 people and say she was sober, sane, in her right mind, and hadn't had a drink of alcohol in a year. And I jumped up and I screamed out, "You are a liar." And somebody said, "Shut up." Well, you know how a wet drunk answer you when you tell them shut up? Make me. Well, they had enough in that meeting to make me. And she started talking about her Jesus, and she started talking about Christ and everything else in this world. And I said, if this is what you were, y'all tricked me. You brought me here to convert me. And if this is what you were, I needed a drink real bad, you know. And I didn't listen to one thing that was said at that meeting. Because I had to get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous to find out. No, it wasn't what that woman talked about Christ. It wasn't the Lord's Prayer and God that they talked about in the meeting. No, remember I told you I got up at 5:30 in the morning that morning and started drinking. I knew that I was going to have me another drink. I did not know the reason until after I got sober. And I found out in the doctor's opinion that my body was screaming out for a drink of alcohol. And when the body screams out for an alcohol, and that head can't do a darn thing about it. And it wasn't that doggone thing. And I wanted to get out of that meeting as fast as I could. But I violated a very serious code in that meeting. Am I living? Am I drinking? Because here I was on the back row. There was not a back door, there's not a window to jump out of. Because I started drinking with, working with, fighting with, cheating with the black and the white wino, which was in Skid Row at Skid Row today, and I guess it'll always be Skid Row in Dallas, Texas. And I've lived on 3 Skid Rows in my lifetime, one for over 6 years, one for over 4.5 years, but the last one for 14 months was the toughest. And I'm not going to stand up here this afternoon and share life on Skid Row with you, but the Skid Rows I lived on, there was no day and there was no night, and there was no sun, and there was no moon, and there were no clouds, and there were no stars. And there were no seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. Just total inner and outer blackness and darkness. And the best way I can describe that kind of an existence is just bodies and feet. And you don't care if you live, you don't care if you die. You don't care if you work, you don't care if you don't work. You don't care if you eat, you don't care if you don't eat. You don't care if you sleep, you don't care if you don't sleep. You don't care if you see your loved ones, you don't care if you see them. You just don't care. And an alcoholic cannot stay on Skid Row. An alcoholic has got to get off of Skid Row. Because an alcoholic will lie about that alcoholic's drinking. That alcoholic will hide that alcoholic's bottle. And I'll tell you right now, if you hide your bottle down the road and don't share it, you're not long for this earth. I don't mind telling you. I did not have to be down there. Because I came from one of the finest families that God ever put on this earth. A mother and father who dedicated their 2 lives to give to the 2 sons that were born in that marriage, and I being the oldest, everything that was denied them when they were growing up. And if one of the sons is going to become an alcoholic, I don't know of a better deal. When you've got a mother and father that's willing to go to every and any length to keep you from hurting and to keep you from suffering and to keep from bringing shame and disgrace on the family name and the family heritage and the family religion. Yeah, I learned a lot of things down on Skid Row. I started drinking bay rum and wine. That was a standard fare. And later on, as I grew older, physically, get more money in my pocket, I go from that bay rum and that wine to that good stuff and never miss a lick. And come down from that good stuff down to Gypsy Road and Thunderbird. I don't know about anybody in AA. I wasn't drinking it because of the price of it. I wasn't drinking it because of the smell of it. I wasn't drinking it because it was socially acceptable. I was drinking it because I liked what it did to me and with me and for me when it got in and down and through me. And I liked what it allowed me to do to you or against you in and down and through me. And little did I realize, after that initial effect of that first drink, it planted something in my head that said, David, every chance you're going to get, You're going to take a drink of alcohol to reproduce that initial effect. And right there and then, it was the beginning of a problem and not an answer. I learned a lot of other things down on Skid Row. Never get your back up against the wall, didn't have a back door window you could jump out of. If you smoke or anything, keep both hands free so you hit and run. I've always been 5'6". I was born 5'6". I'd drink that juice and I'd be 7 foot tall. I've had hundreds of fights, never won a one. My nose has been where my navel is. My navel's been where my right ear. They've been all rearranged. When I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years of age, I run off and joined Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. Now, back in those days, the Ringling Show was the finest and largest under canvas in the entire world. It would have been a thrill for a youngster to go with a circus in those days with all the wild animals and the clowns. And I was with him when Tom Mix and his trick horse Tony ran the Wild West show. I was with him when Gargantua the gorilla come aboard. It would have been a wonderful thing. And I learned in the circus the most beautiful concoction of drink that's ever been devised by a man, called Green Lizard Circus Style. A tremendous drink. Elixir of sodium bromide and Lucky Tiger hair tonic. And I used to drink that stuff, and I'd see Bambi and those animals in Technicolor long before Walt Disney had put them on screen. But I'm trying to live 3 codes of living. I'm trying to live the code of living that society was demanding I live. And that's to go to school and become a useful human being. And be of maximum service to my God and my family and God's kids in the country in which I was fortunate enough to be born in. And I'd end up in sewers and in alleys and cardboard boxes and sleeping over steamed grapes. And then I'm trying to live the code and in goonie roosts and in jails and everything else you can think of. And then I'm trying to live the code of living my mother and father wanted me to live, and they had all the money. And if you already had been in all the trouble I had been in, was in, and getting ready to get into, it takes a lot of money to get you out so you can get back in it again. And then I'm trying to live the code of living that alcohol was demanding on my life, and you're way ahead of me. You know which one won out. Yeah. But while I was in the circus, I drank with the most delightful drunks I ever drank with in my life, any place, anywhere. It's the only bunch of drunks that I was taller than them. I drank with all the midgets. And let me tell you about those midgets. Midgets, first of all, they're tremendous athletes. And when they get drunk, they're just meaner than mean, with every kind of problem in this God's world. And one day, John Ringling North called me to see. I went there and said, "Boy, you're going to have to leave the circus. You're ruining my midgets." I said, "Ruining your midgets? They're ruining me." I went back and told the midgets. The midgets went to see John Ringling North and said, "If he goes, we go. And you can't have a good circus with wild animals and clowns and midgets." But my mother and father would find me, and they'd jerk me, and they'd put me back in school. But my body would be in the chair in the schoolroom, but my mind would be back out there. Couldn't wait to get back out there. And I had to get sober to find out that the reason was very simple. That the reason I wanted back out there? Because I was not through drinking alcohol. I did not know this at the time. I certainly didn't. And so here I am, I'm sitting on the back row in that meeting, and there's not a back door window to jump out. That woman talking about, right now, I want to drink real bad. And as soon as that meeting was over with, everybody goes for the ice cream and the cake and all the other goodies, you know, not me. I ran through those 80 people like a tornado. I got out to the trunk of my car, opened up that half-fifth whiskey. I don't know about anybody in that A, but I drank it down in 2 swallows. Now, that's the way I drank alcohol. I never put it in a brandy glass and run around sniff it 4 or 5 hours and burn candles and incense and listen to Lawrence Welk. I never put an inch of whiskey in a glass, 9 ice cubes, 12.5 inches of soda water, and a straw and a fruit and a cherry and a half a Christmas tree on top of it and suck on it for about 3 hours. To me, that's sick drinking. I drank her to drop her down in that hole where they do the most good and then put another one down. But let me tell you what happened to me when I drank that half-fifth. My hair laid back down. My underwear loosened up. My toes went back in those alligator shoes comfortably. I ran up the steps, got a hold of the oldest sober member of the group, got to arguing with him about the quality of y'all's fellowship. And he said something to me, and I hit him. Now, when I was drinking, I was bad to hit people. Taller than me, shorter than me, fatter than me, skinnier than me. And 2 of his AA babies joined in, and we started to fight. And as far as I was concerned, that fight was a lot better than that AA meeting, because I was just whipping the dickens out of them 2 little wimps. Then they did an unfair thing. They ran in two more members of the group, about the size of outside linebackers on any professional football team. And finally, four of them picked me up bodily, two on each side. Went to the front door, kicked the front door open, and threw me right out of that AA group. As I'm flying through the air, one of them said, "We do not need your kind here." And another one said, "And furthermore, you are too young to be an alcoholic." And God was I glad to hear that. And I stood on that grass at that meeting place with my fist clenched, screaming and hollering and cursing to anybody that listened to me that I would never come back to this Christ soul-saving organization as long as I lived, that I wasn't an alcoholic, I was too young to be an alcoholic. But the next 17 years, everything that could possibly happen to a human being happened to this human being. And the only three things never did happen to me getting ready to get on a drunk, coming off a drunk right to this very second, is I never did willfully murder another human being, fall in love with another man, or die drunk. Other than that, it all happened. Of course, I guess blackouts don't count. I really don't know. We don't want anybody leaving a meeting with resentments, you know. Well, I'd married this wonderful gal, and when we got married, she didn't realize she was marrying an active alcoholic. So when we got married, we didn't start to build a marriage, started to build a booby trap, one that could go off on any week, month, or year. And I was recalled back into the service, and I was, my first time in the service, I didn't get into too much trouble. I was a naval dental officer, and I was aboard Jeep carriers, and I had missed ship a couple of times. And you don't know what it is to be extremely drunk and unsteady of balance, and you fall off the fantail of a battleship, and that sucker is in dry dock. I fell off the New Jersey twice. Once in dry dock in Bremerton and once off Incheon later on. Well, I got recalled back as a naval dental officer, and I went with a combat marine division, and I got into more trouble than trouble. I ended up in a maximum security prison, and I didn't realize the reason it was till I got there. Because of me. And there I was, and I had a leg iron locked around my right leg, and the chain welded to the leg iron. The other end chain welded to steel cot, four-leg steel cot immersed in concrete. And there were armed guerrillas around me 24-hour days daring me to move. I laid like that for 1 solid year. And I'd been laying like that for 6 months. And Christmas of '54. I'm hating society. I got a bad deal. This, that. Now, I was in the best spot to take a long, hard look at me. I wouldn't. It was easier and much more comfortable to blame everything and everybody. And here it is Christmas Day, and in comes the orderly with the Christmas dinner. Now, let me tell you what the Christmas dinner was. It wasn't much better what you got the rest of it. All you got is one little bowl a day, and it was more like dirty dishwater. But for Christmas, they did you a favor. They put a noodle in it. And in comes him with Christmas dinner, and he says to me, "Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas." And I'm so full of Christmas spirit and joy for my fellow man, I say, "Ho, ho, ho, you know what?" He said, "Here is your dinner, you no-good, sorry son of a gun. You're going to be like the rest of them. You'll never leave here." And the word was, when you arrive there, you wasn't going to leave. And I saw how some of them left with sheets from the top of their head down to their toes. And he says, "You're just no good." And when he gave me that bowl, I was so grateful. I picked it up and I hit him right in the face with it. And my Christmas gift for that day was 75 more straight days on nothing. Now that's what you call a bad day. I have not had a day that bad since I have been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and neither have you. I got out of that. There are two still alive and are out drinking. We talk only in generality. There are 10 of us in AA today. Every one of us got sober, not knowing we were all in AA. Didn't know it, met at time. Between March the 15th of 1967 and April the 20th of 1967, and I'm still the baby of the bunch. I got out under some very, very severe circumstances. I talked my wife into taking me back, and we started moving again. And we decided to move to the Panhandle of West Texas to raise our two little boys in a Christian environment. And we moved to a little town of about 3,500 people. I don't know how many of y'all ever lived in a town of 3,500 people in the Panhandle of West Texas. That's a town that's a Christian environment. That's a town that votes dry and drinks wet. And the two most popular people in town is the undertaker and the bootlegger. And I drank and every day, and I got up to where I weighed about 240 some odd pounds, and my blood pressure was so high that every time my pulse would beat, my hair would stand straight up and pump like an oil well. Had a fat doctor friend, lived about 30 miles away. I go see him. And he takes one look at me. He's a good doctor if you're going to be examined while you're drinking. Let's take a drink of alcohol before I examine you. I said, you bet, doctor. Then he put the cuff around my arm and he ran the air up and he says, you know, it's a miracle you are alive. Your blood pressure is so high. Then he says, the reason your blood pressure is so high is because you're so fat. Then he said, the reason that you're so fat is because you eat so much. Well, that wasn't true. I was bloated. And he said, you do not have any guts, you do not have any willpower, and I'm going to have to give you some help. And he wrote me a prescription for 60 of the most beautiful capsules I have ever seen in my life called Nemudons. And he says, take them as directed. I said, doctor, will it be all right if I drink a couple of beers while I take those beauties? He says, I do not believe it will hurt you. He never should have told me that. So I went home and I had the prescription filled and went home to lose weight and stay drunk. Well, I looked at the prescription. It says to take one 3 times a day after meals. Well, who eats when you drink? And every good, self-respectful drinking drunk knows if one's good, two's better, and three's terrific. So I just took 3 of them and drank some alcohol. Didn't feel like I was losing any weight. Come back out and took 3 more of them. Drank some more alcohol, went in the bathroom, turned sideways, looked in the mirror, didn't look like I was losing any weight. Come out and took a handful of them, drank some more whiskey. Looked like my stomach's getting bigger. Our co-founder Bill wrote some very prophetic lines when he said, when a drunk is drinking, it's time out of mind. It's so slow, and the only sad thing I found about Alcoholics Anonymous, the time passes so fast sober, where does it go? And finally I took all the pills and drank all the whiskey. And the next thing I knew, I was out in my backyard, and I was picking peaches off of rose bushes, I don't mind telling you. And they tell me I ran around that little town for 2 days talking in the unknown tongue, you know. And being one of 2 Jewish families in 5 counties around, they gathered everybody in to see and hear the miracle. Because word had spread like wildfire. The Jew had caught the Holy Ghost, you know. And when I come to and realized what happened, I said, my gosh, those pills are messing up my drinking. Oh, I'd been to the psychiatrist, and all the questions he asked me, my wife used to ask me for nothing. Judges used to ask me for nothing. Sheriffs used to ask me for nothing. People used to ask me for nothing. And we had to move away from that little town. And we moved back to Dallas with a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. But I'm taking me with me. And it wasn't long before I'm down on that last Skid Row, sleeping in them 55-cent a night hotel rooms with your shoes tied around your neck, emptying wine bottles. I went home once the last 11 months I drank. I walked in and my wife looked at me and she said, do you have to drink and do the things that you do? I said, Grace, I cannot stop drinking. Why don't you find another man that will marry you? You're such a fine lady that'll be a wonderful and good husband to you. And a father that'll find 2 boys. I cannot function as a son. I cannot function as a husband. I cannot function as a father. I cannot function as a professional man. I have no desire to live. I'm going to die drunk. And I grabbed my bottle and I went out to try to proceed to kill myself. And somewhere along the line on April 18th, 19th, 20th, 1967, I really don't know, I found the handwriting on the floor of the county jail in Dallas, Texas. Now, I've been in lots of jails, and being in jail is not a requirement for membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. By this time, I run out of everything. I got down to me. I couldn't stay sober, and I couldn't stay drunk, and I couldn't kill myself, and I couldn't stay alive, and me didn't like me was, but me was going with me every place me went. I didn't holler. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I didn't even put a condition on it. I just simply said, God, help me. And I know right this very second, there's not only God for me then, there is right this second because I'm still here. And I have not had a drink of alcohol. But the minute I got me out of me, with no conditions on it, something deep inside me kept saying, Alcoholics Anonymous, continued sobriety, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, if I ever get out of this jail, I have to find those people in Alcoholics Anonymous. In this jail, as I was led to him, he said these words, boy, if you ever show up my jail again for drinking, drunk, and doing the things you do, I'll have you put away to where you'll never bother another human being, bird, tree, dog, or rock. Do you understand? I said, yes, sir, Mr. Bill. He says, you can go. I heard him so well that day, I walked right out of his office, right across the street, into a whiskey store and bought me another bottle of Muscadoodle and went to the park with the rest of the pigeons and the winos and said I beat him again. But how I got by him this time, I don't know. When I got out, I started looking for Edith, the gal who asked me to come to her first year anniversary. I found out that Edith had passed away, but she was continuously sober when she died. Her sponsor, Moena, had moved to West Texas. After I was sober 9 months, Moena moved back to Dallas. She became secretary of the group again. And it wasn't long after that she went to manicuring again. And I used to see Moena every Wednesday morning as my manicurist. And in March of 1986, Moena passed away. And if she would have lived 2 more months, she would have been 37 continuous years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. There was a man at that meeting, the only one that I could remember. He was sober 8 years. He went back to drinking. He drank for 8 years. And this past December, a year ago, he passed away. And when he died, he was sober 26, 27 years, this stretch. I called him up. Here's a man that you normally cannot reach by phone, mail, or anywhere else. He was a tremendous successful businessman, a tremendously rich man. He was a confidant of presidents, and that's not the reason I called him. It's the only one I knew. You normally can't get him. You've got to go through 19 secretaries and 2 chauffeurs. That morning I called, and Helen said, just a minute. And W.O. got on the phone. He said, what do you want? I said, W.O., are you still interested in Alcoholics Anonymous? He said, yes. Then he said, who is it for? I said, it's for me. He said, well, we have a meeting tomorrow night. Let's just go and get it over with. And don't you take a drink of alcohol today. And call me at 7:30 in the morning. Boom, and he hung up, and that's all he told me. And after 37 and a half years giving it the best shot, it was cold turkey. Well, it's more like frozen buzzard, if you want to know the truth about it. I started walking and shaking out of drunk. And 7:30 the next morning, I called him. He said, are you drinking alcohol? I said, no, sir. He said, don't you take a drink of alcohol today, and call me at 3:30 this afternoon. Boom, and he hung up again. Started that walking and that shaking. And finally at 3:30, I called him. He said, are you drinking alcohol? I said, no, sir. Then he said, do you really want to come to an AA meeting? I said, more than anything else in this world. He said, would you like for me to come get you? And being about as humble as Hitler, I said, I'll get there under my own steam. And he told me where to go. And then he hung up. Well, I was in a terrible predicament. All my clothes and my possessions I had on. I had an old pair of thermal underwear, an old gray sweater with the elbows out to elbows, an old pair of gray flannel pants with all my possessions in it. No socks, but I still hadn't quite lost everything yet. I had a pair of beat-up old alligator shoes. And the only money I had was 30 cents. And that was all that was left from the last money blood I'd sold to Blood Bank to buy wine. And when one comes to AA in that shape, one is not doing well. And I looked at the mirror at my old dirty self, and I said, I can't go to Alcoholics Anonymous looking like this. I'm a professional man. And I heard that Grace had thrown out all my clothes. But I took a chance and I called her up. And I said, Grace, she said, who is it? I said, me. She said, what does me want? I said, Grace, do you happen to have one of my old suits? She says, yes, I have one, and it is to bury you in. Now, that's before she come to Al-Anon. I then asked that woman the most foolish question I've ever asked her in my life. I said, do you mind if I borrow it for a little while? I'm going to an AA meeting, said another one of your lies, and hung up. Well, that suits the story in itself. She let me back in her house. Now, there was an instant joy when I walked in that household and told them I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything I looked at, touched, breathed on, inhaled, she ran behind me and she sprayed. I put that old suit on, that's a story in itself. Bid she and the young'un goodbye. Got into a Mustang that the bank was looking to repossess it, but they couldn't recognize it. Looked like an accordion. And off I went to the meeting. And I walked in, looked like the same people that were there 17 years earlier. And one of the older members came up to me and he bent down, he looked at me and he grinned from ear to ear and he said, we knew you'd be back. And now I want to tell you about the greatest day talk I've ever heard in my life. Every member of Alcoholics Anonymous heard it, and if your group has not told it to you, you have been cheated. Now, hey, we don't have any speakers. Now, we're just a bunch of talkers. Because ours is the language of the heart, and thank God it is not the language of the gutter. This fine man said to me, welcome, come in and sit down and have a cup of coffee, and let's talk about it. We understand exactly how you feel. That is the greatest AA talk I've ever heard in my life. He didn't say to me, you never should have done those things. He didn't say to me, if you really loved me, you wouldn't have done those things. No. We understand exactly how you feel. It's the first time in the last 17 years of my drinking that anyone shook my hand. First time in the last 17 years of my drinking anyone invited me in. It's the first time in the last 17 years of my drinking anyone asked me to share a cup of coffee with him other than in other places. And certainly the first time in my life that anyone asked me to come in and sit in a meeting with him, it wasn't in a mission or somewhere else. And I'm sitting there and I'm shaking and I'm jumping and the drunks are on either side of me and they're putting their hands on my knees and my shoulders and my elbow and saying, first things first, easy does it, this too will pass. And then when they passed the basket, and money come for me, it's the first time I didn't reach in and take out some. And then when it was over with, and they stood and said the Lord's Prayer, and I did not know the Lord's Prayer, and no one called me an atheist, and no one called me an agnostic, and no one called me an idiot, and no one called me a dummy. And after that, those fine people, many of them walked up to me and they hugged me and they kissed me and they told me how much they loved me. And they loved me for what I had done and what I was right there in that. And when I got ready to leave that meeting, those fine people said, David, please come back. We need you, and you need us. Folks, that is Alcoholics Anonymous. Nothing more, nothing less. Just God's grace, the miracle of sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous, our way of life, hugging and loving an alcoholic who thought life was over with, who didn't want to live anymore. And in that infusion of that love and that desire. And it started a way of life that's indescribably wonderful. Oh, we could have run the steps, we could have gone through the traditions, we could talk to service structure, we could do the concepts of world service and all this, everything else in AA. But the story still is the most powerful vehicle that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. Little I realized that when I got sober, that my wife and our two sons would ever be back together again. Because that marriage had been written off by everything and everybody, and it had no right to be. But only because of God's grace through the miracle of Alcoholics in my life, and only because of God's grace through the miracle of Al-Anon in Grace's life. This past June the 10th, or let me put it this way, if I'm alive and sober and Grace behaves, this June the 10th, Grace and I, which is also AA's birthday, Grace and I will be married 52 years, and that's pretty good for a drunk. Although I was not there for many, many years, you know, and I'm not going to stand up here and tell you because I'm in AA and Grace is in Al-Anon that our marriage is just absolutely beautiful, that the butterflies are tranquil, that the bluebirds are hugging and kissing and cooing. Heck no. We have a few short rounds every now and then. We have a few long rounds every now and then. That's what you call clearing the air, communicating. The best way I can describe our marriage today, it's built on solid, constructive imperfections. Because it's by our imperfections that we grow. And anyway, I go to 5 to 7, 8 meetings a week. Grace goes to 4 to 5 Al-Anon meetings a week. We don't see each other enough to have all that nitpicking, arguing, fighting, and fussing. Our two sons, they're grown today, and they're tremendously successful. And I didn't have a thing to do with it. Our oldest son, when he was 15 years of age, had a butcher knife to my breastbone, and he was going to kill me for what I was doing to their mother. And if I could have gotten off that floor, I'd have beat him to death. But the wildness left his eyes. He dropped that knife. He turned around and he spat in my face, and he says, "You're no longer my father, and I am no longer your son," and he walked out of my life. And that hurt. Oh, it hurt. And I had no communication with him for quite a few years. You see, their mother was their mother was their father, their mother was their Santa Claus, their mother took them on vacations, and their mother took them to Little League and to Cub Scouts and later on to Boy Scouts. Their mother was the only link to sanity that those two boys had. And they couldn't stand to see what was happening to their mother. Because here she had married someone, and she saw me totally go down the drain, and she was helpless and powerless to do anything about it. And they were willing to kill me to hold on to that only link and small thread of sanity that they were capable of holding on to. But today, because of AA and Al-Anon, in the family life and AA in my life, today we not only have a tremendous father and son relationship, but more important, we're the best of friends. We're two beautiful daughter-in-laws and two of the most beautiful granddaughters that anyone could ever be blessed to have. The oldest one is 11, she thinks she's 16. And the little one is 5. They're multilingual, and they do things. I can't even turn a computer on. They send me letters written on a computer, you know. And I darn near missed the whole thing. Darn near missed it. Now, AA did not save my marriage. No. Alcoholics Anonymous gave me a set of principles to live like the son I've always wanted to live. To be the kind of a husband I've always wanted to be. To be the kind of father that I've always wanted to be. And to be the kind of a professional man that I've always wanted to be. But more important, it gave me a way to live to be like I believe God wants me to be. Every indignity that happened to me has been worth it, because it brought me to you people. And through you people, I found a God of my understanding. A God that I know that loves me more than anything else in this world, just like he loves each and every one of you more than anything else in this world. What Dr. Silkworth told Bill when Bill was laying in town hospital, and Bill had what we call in AA Bill's hot flash. And he was explaining it to Dr. Silkworth. Am I crazy? Dr. Silkworth, Bill, I don't know what you've got, but hold on to it. It's the best thing you've ever had. All of us in AA, hold on to it. It's the best thing we've ever had, or will ever have. When I got sober, I had to go to the regulatory agency that licensed my profession to make a living. I had to go down and tell them the truth. They already knew it. They wanted to hear it from me. I went down, they kept me down there for a week. They said, we're going to let you go back. We'll be watching you one day at a time. I've been back ever since. Now, y'all have heard only the nicer parts of my story. And I'm asked by many members of Alcoholics Anonymous and those who know me that are not in the fellowship, David, you were gone for long stretches of time. You were locked up. How did you ever get through school? Well, I was my class valedictorian in high school. I finished second of a class of 450 at Southern Methodist University. And I'm a graduate of Baylor University College of Dentistry. He says, how'd you do it? Real simple. You cheat. It doesn't take our kind long to find another human being who will do for us what we cannot possibly do for ourselves. Now, what's happened to me since I've been there, this is not me, it's all Alcoholics Anonymous. Because ours is not a personal success story, but one of colossal human failure, converted into great strength by the alchemy of the living grace of God, as expressed in the recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous and our fellowship therein. And y'all have been so kind, and I want to leave you with something. I'm hoping that our General Service Conference, one of these days, will take part of what I'm saying from a letter and put it into a service piece and make it available for not only all the members of Alcoholics Anonymous at the current time, but all those to come. It's a reprint of a letter that was written to our co-founder Bill on December the 30th, 1946. The letter was written to Bill by a non-alcoholic who loved AA more than anything else in this world, including his family. A non-alcoholic whose family name is perhaps the most famous family name that the world has known up to now as far as money, banking, energy, foundations, education, fellowships, and grants. And if it hadn't been for that particular non-alcoholic and his non-alcoholic friends who believed mightily in the early days of AA, that Bill and Dr. Bob probably never would have continued. Our big book never would have been written, and from our big books we got our name. And the letter was written to Bill by John D. Rockefeller, Jr., thanking Bill for a World War II printing of the Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That due to the paper shortage, they had to cut the size of the book down, but they never dropped out anything out of it. The first part of the letter is thanking Bill for the inscription on the flyleaf and for the book. But this is the part of the letter I want to leave with you, quote to Bill. It must be of great satisfaction for you to realize that the helping hand that you extended to a needy brother many years ago has resulted in the widespread extension of that brotherly act. The regenerating power of the Spirit of that helping hand has been the means by which countless lives have been saved that otherwise would have been wrecked. May God continue to bless you and use you ever increasingly as his chosen instrument in the rebuilding of broken lives. Every one of us in this meeting right this very second, we're here, and in AA all over the world, we're here as a result of the extension of that friendly hand from Bill to Dr. Bob to Bill D, and here we are. The regenerating of the power of the human spirit tied in with the contact of a power greater than ourselves that allows us now to live in dignity, a way to live in dignity and walk with our fellow man in this world of reality. If there's a hope, if there's a desire, if there is a wish that I have for each and every one of us, may we continue to let God bless us and use us ever increasingly as his chosen instrument in the rebuilding of broken lives. And how will God continue to do this? And that is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. God bless each and one of you. Thank you, and I love you so much.